As a matter of fact, I recall one time he was giving a tour of the museum in his docent role, and I overheard him talking to a group of people about the Indianapolis, and I was like, this guy is a walking encyclopedia of what happened there. So I think you're really in for a treat today. Without any further ado, if you guys will give a hand to Jim Groh. Let me slip by you, Jim. And I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the museum. See a lot of friends out here. That helps. Yeah, according to the handout, I'm Jim Groh.
Who are you?
I'm an Air Force veteran. And, well, my heart's in my throat, but I'm excited about all this. Go figure. So yeah, I've been with the museum for 9 years. And over the years, I've done a number of jobs, filled a number of roles. But most recently, the job that I find most satisfying is that of being a docent. I like leading tours. I like telling our stories. We have 10 rooms of exhibits upstairs. If you haven't toured already, please do. We have, every room is full of stories. And over the years, I have gravitated towards and rather adopted the story of the USS Indianapolis. It's my specialty. It's become my specialty. Now, when I lead a tour, I've been known to hold forth for 15 minutes just at that exhibit alone. And I don't think I've ever bored anybody, thank goodness. But it's a tragic story. It touches my heart. It fires my outrage. And I'm honored and humbled to be able to tell it. Have a seat. It's a very complex story. And of all our stories, it has most to do with the museum. Paul Murphy. He's a survivor of the Indianapolis, and he's one of the 6 men who founded our museum. This is a picture of our front hallway. There he is. There'll be more about him at the end of the presentation. As I said, it's a very complex story. Look at all that. It was the ship of state for Roosevelt, then it was the flagship of the Fifth Fleet. Then it earned 10 battle stars in the Pacific War, in almost every island-hopping battle you've heard of. It was kamikazed at Okinawa, but she didn't sink. She went to San Francisco and got repaired, and then carried the atomic bomb parts to Tinian, secret cargo. And on its second mission, it was torpedoed and sunk by a Japanese submarine. And because of a number of Navy blunders, those men floated in the water unheard of for 4 days and 5 nights. The SOSs, the Navy long claimed that there were no SOSs sent from the ship, but it turns out they were sent out, they were received, and they were not acted on. I'm going to be talking about a number of Navy blunders in this, so sorry about all the Navy folks here. 880 men were lost. 300 went down with the ship, 900 went into the water. The story was suppressed by the Navy. Of course, there were inquiries and investigations. The Navy saw fit to court-martial the captain, who was utterly innocent. He wound up committing suicide 23 years later. Paul Murphy was president of the survivors group, and he and his wife, Mary Lou, were instrumental in getting a physical memorial created in Indianapolis for the Indianapolis. And then the survivors sought the exoneration of the captain posthumously, but ultimately they were successful. And Paul moved to Broomfield and became one of our museum founders. And at the end, only one survivor remains today.
What's this, a schoolboy under the story?
Yes, that's a major part of the presentation. Yeah, you'll hear about that. Basically, the story was bound for obscurity, and a schoolboy in Pensacola took it on himself to, first of all, win a high school history project, but then he went on to become nationally famous, and you'll hear.
I know you went through every one except that one, so that's why I asked.
So it's time to introduce the ship and its captain. The Indianapolis here is a heavy cruiser built for speed, and as such, the hull is a bit thinner than most ships. That would be a problem later. Is built to the restrictions of the 1930s Navy, London Naval Treaty, which limited the total number of heavy cruisers and their overall combined tonnage in an attempt to stave off a naval arms race in the wake of World War I. I'm going to draw your attention to some of the features on the ship. It carries 9 8-inch guns in 3 turrets. That's what makes her a heavy cruiser. Here's a spoiler alert. Here's where the torpedoes hit. You'll hear about that. These things are gun directors. This is the 5-inch gun director, and that's an 8-inch gun director, 8-inch and 5-inch and 8-inch. What they do is they have a binocular vision, and they sight in the enemy, and they can tell what the range is of the enemy, and it computes the range, the course and speed of the target ship, and the course of speed of the Indianapolis, including her pitch and roll, and comes up with a proper firing solution for the guns. That's what gun directors do. And now on the ship there are 2 radio rooms. They become important in the story. Radio room 1 is here under the bridge, this being the bridge. Radio room 2 is back here by the aft funnel. What else can I say about the ship? Yes. Airplane hangars. Ship has scout planes to inspect the accuracy of its fire on its target. They will fly off the catapult, go do their reconnaissance, come back, land in the water beside the ship, and a crane would come over and pick them up and put them back on the catapult. That's how they were used. It was before radar. Anyway, the scout planes were stored with the wings folded up in 2 big hangars, big open spaces. On the Indianapolis's fatal voyage, one of these, I think it was the port hangar, was in use to carry a secret cargo, which you'll hear about. And the captain, Captain Charles Butler McVeigh III. He was a well-liked and well-respected captain of a ship. He was the son and the grandson of 2 very powerful and influential and well-respected admirals in the Navy. Charles III was on track to become one of them. Here's her specs of the ship: the length, the beam, the displacement, the draft. There's going to be a test after this. The propulsion. Overall speed 33 knots. That's pretty fast. And the complement at the time was 1,197 men. Here's some details of what's on board. These are the 8-inchers in turrets. Now that it says up there 8-inch 55. That second number is the caliber. What that number is the how much longer the barrel is than the bore. So if you multiply 8-inch times 55, you come up with 36'8". That's how long the barrel was. Likewise, the 5-inch guns that's 5-inch 25 caliber, and that works out to 10'5" for the length of the barrel. And the smaller guns, they had this. It's hard to tell here, but there are 4 barrels there. It's a 40 millimeter Bofors cannon in quad mounts, 24 of those, and then 16 of these 20 millimeter Oerlikon cannon for anti-aircraft fire in twin mounts, you can see. And here are the gun directors I pointed out. The radar was recently installed on the ship. It looked like a big set of bed springs. And instead of, well, you see our model here has, the scout planes are biplanes. On its fatal voyage, it had 2 of these. Normally would have 4, but it had 2 of these Curtiss SC-1 Seahawks. Note the big float. That's how it was able to land in the water. Here's her history. She was laid down in March 1930. She was commissioned in 32. Her first voyages were as ship of state for President Roosevelt. They had sailed President Roosevelt around the world, especially South America. But as World War II started, she became the flagship of the Fifth Fleet, commanded by Admiral Raymond Spruance. And as such, she took part in almost every island-hopping battle you've heard of in the island-hopping war of the Pacific. You know, Bougainville, the Aleutians, Gilbert's, Marshalls, Palau, Saipan, Guam, Tinian. All these islands we recaptured from the Japanese as we marched across the Pacific. Finally, Iwo Jima and Okinawa. And in fact, at Okinawa, she was kamikazed. Question?
Could you point out on that map where Tinian is?
Yeah, it's hard to tell, but Saipan here is in the Marianas. Tinian is and Guam, which is close by, are right about here.
Okay.
No, Tinian's only 3 miles across the channel from Saipan.
But from how about Guam? Tinian and Guam I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. Tinian is about 112 miles.
It's a day's sailing. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, the kamikaze plane, along with, it was a big kamikaze attack at Okinawa, in the waters off Okinawa. The plane itself flew down and glanced off the fantail deck and bounced into the ocean, but the bomb it was carrying detached, broke through the hull, broke through all the compartments below decks, broke through the decks, and all the compartments below decks, then broke through the hull, then exploded underneath the ship. And it destroyed, it blew a big hole in the ship. It destroyed one of the propeller shafts, wrecked a water treatment plant, and killed 9 men. But she didn't sink. She limped all the way from Okinawa back to San Francisco. I think they had plugged the hole up with concrete, actually. That's what I heard. And she arrives at at Mare Island Navy Yards. That's where ships are repaired, big Navy yard at the time, in early April 1945. And there she was repaired and refitted with new equipment. And about the beginning of July, Captain McVeigh was hoping to have about another couple of weeks to just tidy things up, get rid of the dead parts, the paint buckets, everything, and just tidy up the place and get the crew trained. There were 250 raw recruits, many of whom had never been to sea before. Well, instead of 2 weeks to tidy things up, McVeigh was called, he was ordered to sail in 3 days. The reason he was for that, he found out when he was called to San Francisco to meet with 2 guys from the Manhattan Project. These guys are Captain Parsons and Admiral Purnell. They, in fact, Captain Parsons was he was going to be the guy on the Enola Gay who armed the bomb and assembled and armed the bomb. They informed McVeigh, we've got a secret cargo for you and a secret mission. You are to sail to Hunter's Point, which is down here off San Francisco Bay. Pick up the cargo, then sail as fast as you can go to the island of Tinian via Pearl Harbor, where you'll be picking up, dropping off passengers and refueling. And they told him, we cannot tell you what that cargo is, but every day you save will shorten the war by that much. no pressure. So he was unaware of what the cargo was. There was scuttlebutt that it was 10,000 rolls of scented toilet paper for Admiral MacArthur, or for General MacArthur. But you know, there's all manner of scuttlebutt in the Navy, none of which is true. Well, so he did. He sailed to Hunters Point, docked on the 15th. He was scheduled to sail on the 16th. At some point, a truck drove up to the dock, and the doors opened, and out came a number of armed guards. They opened up the back of the truck and hauled out this big wooden crate. It was 15 feet long by 5 feet by 5 feet. A crane came along and picked it up and put it on the Indianapolis into one of those airplane hangars. And in addition to that, there was this funny looking metal cylinder that they took off the truck, and it was really heavy. It was 18 inches wide, 2 feet high, and it looked like an oversized wastebasket with a lead lid bolted on. And it was so heavy it had a steel ring at the middle of the top, and two sailors came along, passed a steel bar through the ring, hoisted it up between them, and marched it up the gangplank, and put it in one of the vacant flag lieutenant's cabin. Well, by 4:30 in the morning on the 16th, would have been 5:30 in the morning New Mexico time. If anybody had been looking off to the southeast, they would have seen a flash in the sky. The Trinity test. America had the ability to build 3 bombs, and the first one they tested at Alamogordo, if you will, and the second one was destined for Hiroshima, and the third one was destined for Nagasaki. But nobody noticed it, including the 2 men who were accompanying the cargo. I got to tell you about them. It's a...
Did they transfer both those bombs on the same ship at the same time?
No. No, the Nagasaki bomb, I believe, was flown to Tinian. The men accompanying the cargo were Major Robert Furman and Captain James Nolan. Robert Furman had been into international espionage. He'd been traveling around Europe trying to assess the Nazi Germany's ability, how far along their atomic bomb program was, which wasn't very far. And then Captain Nolan was a physician. He's a radiologist. His specialty is the effects of radiation on the human body. So you can guess what was in that funny cylinder. A slug of uranium. It was the heart of the Hiroshima bomb. Well, she weighed anchor at 8 in the morning, passed under the Golden Gate Bridge, and at 8:36, and on its way to Pearl Harbor to start with. And the trip to Pearl Harbor, wait a minute, look what also put to sea on July 16th. Yes, it was a new submarine. It was armed with 19 Type 95 torpedoes, and Type 95 torpedoes were a smaller version of the infamous Type 93 torpedo. They were fast, they were accurate, they were powerful. If they hit a ship, they would send it down. And notice these things. These are Kaitans, they're suicide torpedoes. A man will get in this, close the hatch, and cast off in search of a target. And either hit it and explode, or not find the target and sink to the bottom of the ocean. Either way, he is eager to give his life for the emperor. That's the way the Japanese were. They were clamoring for him to launch them on various missions. The skipper, Matsusura Hashimoto, he was a frustrated man. He had not had a significant kill in his whole career. He had a shrine in the front of the boat and would pray at it daily for success. He was to find it. Now it's time to introduce the brass in all of this. All these men have a role in the story. Starting at the top, James Forrestal was Secretary of the Navy, and then the most powerful man in the Navy was Fleet Admiral Ernest J. King. They were both in Washington. In command of the Pacific through this war, Commander-in-Chief Pacific, otherwise known as CINCPAC, was Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz. Now, he was based in Pearl Harbor, but CINCPAC had an advanced headquarters in Guam, which was farther west, and that was commanded by Commodore James Carter. Carter is a fellow that Captain McVeigh is going to meet with in Guam to discuss his route. And then a sub-command in the Pacific in CINCPAC's jurisdiction is the Marianas, and the commander of the Marianas is Vice Admiral Murray, and his surface operations officer is Captain Oliver Naquin. And in my opinion, between Ernest King and Oliver Naquin, they're the villains of the story. You'll hear more about him. Waldron is another fellow that McVeigh is going to meet with to discuss his route. He's the convoy and routing officer for the Marianas Command. And the other half, well, the Pacific is divided in half along a thing called the chop line. East of that is CINCPAC's jurisdiction. Hello? I know. And west of that is a jurisdiction known as the Philippine Sea Frontier. So the commanding officers that includes the Philippine Islands as well as the Philippine Sea. The commander is Gillette, and his operations officer is Granum. These two men will later get reprimands, and you'll find out why. Now these next two guys, Oldendorf and McCormick, Vice Admiral Jesse Oldendorf is putting together a task force, a naval fleet, for the eventual invasion of Japan. Something we didn't need to do, as it turned out, but we didn't know it at the time. And to train ships for that task force he has charged Vice Admiral, Rear Admiral Lynd McCormick. He's in charge of the training group. They are the folks who McVeigh and the Indianapolis are supposed to report to when they get to Leyte. And then finally in Leyte, I mean, you imagine the Philippine Islands, along with all the others, have recently won from the Japanese and populated with, by an expanding navy, setting up commands all the way along the way. And the liberation of the Philippines led to the ability to create a big port at Leyte, huge port. And the port directors were just Jules Sancho and Lieutenant Stuart Gibson as operation officer. Here's a spoiler alert, they're the ones who failed to report the Indianapolis missing. But that comes later. Well, July 16th, Indy leaves San Francisco and comes to Pearl Harbor in 74 and a half hours, setting a speed record that lasts to this day. I think I worked it out, I think it averaged 32 knots, which is pretty hard on the engines. So at Pearl Harbor, she dropped off some passengers, took on fuel, and then continued on to Tinian with a little bit slower speed to be nicer to his engines. And he arrived in Tinian on July 26th, a week later, and docked right here. This is a map of Tinian. At the time, Tinian was the largest airdrome in the world, hundreds of B-29s. Anyhow, the Indy was able to offload its cargo to the docks, and the two custodians of the bomb, who didn't know until then that the bomb was actually successful, they were on the ship. They were looking out at the dock, and they saw more brass than they'd ever seen in their lives. And they saw big grins on the right guys who told them that the atomic bomb test had been successful. So, mission accomplished. Secret though. Well, the next mission was the problem. It came to McVeigh via dispatch. And it basically said, sail to Guam, then proceed to Leyte, undergo training with Lynn McCormick, he's that training guy for the task force. Then report to the commander of the task force, Oldendorf, but didn't give any sailing details, any route or speed details. That would come later. Now every dispatch has an action addressee or addressees, and in this case, Charles McVeigh, and every dispatch has an information addressee. In this case, two men, Oldendorf and McCormick. Now, Oldendorf got the dispatch, so he knew that the Indianapolis was coming. The training man, Lynn McCormick, didn't get it. His communications office garbled the decoding of the addressee. It looked like it was like for somebody else, so they never decoded the body of the message, and they didn't request a resend. So McCormick didn't get the dispatch, so he doesn't know that India's coming.
Tell us again where McCormick fit into the command structure, or what his job was.
He was in charge of the training for Oldendorf's task force, which was being assembled. Is that right? Okay. So off she went. A day's sailing, she arrives in Guam, and this is where she really is going to figure out, or McVeigh is going to figure out what his sailing orders are. Starts by meeting with Commodore Carter of Advanced SyncPac, and in discussing the general danger in the area, Carter says the Japs are on their last legs, there's nothing to worry about. These are all little bricks in the disaster, and they add up. Then he meets and has lunch with Raymond Spruance, who is there at Guam. Then he met with Lieutenant Joseph Waldron. He is the routing officer for the Naval Operating Base Guam. And they discuss the details of the route. He's told to take Route Petty. Now, that's a funny name. But the Navy apparently has seen fit to name its shipping routes after prep schools. Petty is a prep school in New Jersey. Go figure. But that's the name of it. And the 15.7 knot average would put him in Leyte, just off Leyte, in time to do some offshore artillery practice. Then he would dock. Well, McVeigh asked for an escort. A heavy cruiser has no ability to defend itself against submarine attack. Usually, a heavy cruiser or a battleship traveling by itself gets an escort of destroyers. Destroyers have the ability to defend against torpedo attack. They have and submarines. They have depth charges, they have guns, they have things called hedgehogs. Well, so Waldron didn't know. He phoned the office of Captain Naquin. He's under George Murray. I introduced them in the brass, commander of the Marianas, and asked if an escort is available. And he was told gruffly, not necessary. Well, that took Waldron aback. He wasn't asking if it was necessary. He knew in that area it wasn't necessary. He was just asking if one was available. Maybe if there was a destroyer planning to go that way, maybe it could be arranged for them to travel together. The answer to that was a gruff, not necessary. So Waldron took that as the final answer, hung up the phone, and McVeigh accepted that also. Now, what makes him rather a villain was that because America had broken the Japanese code under the Ultra program, we were listening to all Japanese military messages. We decoded, and as a result, all the flag officers above McVeigh knew that there were actually Japanese submarines patrolling the area with offensive missions, told to sink ships. Before that, largely Japanese submarines were used for reconnaissance and resupply, but now the Japanese Navy is desperate. It's near the end of the war. They tell their submarines to sink ships.
But we know this because of the intel we have.
Yes, because the Ultra program broke the Japanese code. But Naquin doesn't tell McVeigh. Knowledge of the breaking of Ultra and the breaking of the Japanese code is for flag officers only, admirals and above. So McVeigh wasn't of a rank where he was authorized to know that. So he was not told that there were 4 Japanese submarines along his shipping route to Leyte. And McVeigh is told to zigzag at his discretion. Now, zigzagging is a standard Navy maneuver. It's rather boilerplate. If you're traveling alone and you can be seen, you should be zigzagging. That would supposedly decrease your chance of being hit by a torpedo. If it's dark or night or cloudy, it's overcast, feel free to go straight, but it's at your discretion. So they told McVeigh to zigzag at his discretion. Here it is. So, Indianapolis on the 28th departs Guam. The second ill-fated dispatch goes out from Guam. The port director at Guam sent this one. Now, rather than have you wade through all this, the body of the message said that the Indianapolis departed Guam 0900 July 28th, speed overall 15.7 knots, route Petty, then to Leyte, will cross the chop line 30 July, and the ETA in Leyte Gulf is 0800, that would be a Tuesday, and the ETA in Harbor would be 11 a.m. 31 July. That was his ETA, which people were supposed to act on. Oh, and the addressees, again, we've got action addressees. Naquin, Sancho and Gibson, these are the port, he's the port director. Down here for information addressees, Spruance, Murray, Oldendorf and Gillette, Nimitz. Well, talking about bricks in the disaster, these are other factors. I've already said that the Navy, including all flag officers above McVeigh, know of 4 Japanese submarines patrolling the Philippine Sea with offensive missions. The result was of Ultra, the breaking of the code. McVeigh was not notified or rerouted. I think that he could have been rerouted and not given the reason. He could have been notified just to keep his eye, a special eye peeled for submarines without telling him why, but they didn't. In fact, there were submarine sightings along his route. On 24th of July, the USS Underhill was sunk. It rammed a Khitan, and it was blown in 2. McVeigh was not notified. On the 28th of July, that was the day that the Indianapolis left Guam, the merchant ship Wild Hunter actually saw a submarine, called in 2 destroyers to attack it, and they attacked it for 15 hours with hedgehogs, which are small airborne grenades that fire off the ship, and they go out in a pattern. But they missed because there was an error in the gyroscope that directed them. The submarine escaped. McVeigh was not notified. Now, another factor is this. In January 45, Carter of Cinque Advanced issued this thing, the confidential letter 10 CL 45, and among other things it said, arrival reports shall not be made for combatant ships. It's directed to harbor, for 2 reasons. Security, I mean, port traffic generates radio traffic. The Japanese are listening. So it's okay to report the arrival of non-combatant ships, but combatant ships are important, and we'd rather the Japanese not know where they are. So, security measure. And because we'd recently liberated the Philippines, there was a lot of activity in the port, and the port directors were new to their jobs, and they were distracted. So they took this 10 CL-45 also to mean don't report the non-arrival of a ship. It didn't specifically say it. There's nothing in 10 CL-45 about the non-arrival of a ship. But in fact, there was no procedure at all in the Navy for the non-arrival, dealing with the non-arrival of a ship that was expected. So as a result, when its ETA came, they didn't report it missing. And the worst, or the last part, is that the Indianapolis was assumed to arrive. At its ETA, it was assumed to have arrived, and it was taken off the plotting boards. Now, a plotting board is a big, transparent sheet with little models of ships on it that you can move along. But the position of any of those models is just based on estimated speed and course, not actual contact with the ship. So when the ETA of a ship comes, they pull them off, both in the port where it left from and the port where it was destined. Well, that led to a condition of out of sight, out of mind. So that was another brick in the disaster. Well, here's a map of it all. Here's Tinian and Guam. There's Route Petty, intended. There's the Philippines. There's Leyte. Tacloban is the name of the town nearby, but that's the harbor. And this is where she got it. Japanese submarine I-58 came in from the north, parked itself about here, and was on the surface looking around. And the night was cloudy. The clouds were broken, and now and then a moon would shine through. The moon was rising in the east. And just as the clouds broke and the moon shone through, Hashimoto was happening to look east. He saw the Indianapolis coming. So he waited until she got a beam, fired 6 torpedoes, and 2 of them hit. Now, this is a hell of a painting, but it's actually inaccurate. Japanese submarine I-58 was not on the surface. It was at periscope depth and pointed at Indianapolis. But it was able to see what it did. Now that image is also inaccurate. There's only 2 explosions in reality. Well, in fact, from periscope depth, once Hashimoto saw he had struck the ship, he did a deep dive and stayed down for an hour, reloading his torpedo tubes. And then after an hour, he did surface and look around. He saw no ship, no debris, no men, no oil slick. So he departed the area. But as he did, he sent a message home. He said, "I have sunk a ship, a big ship. I don't know if it was a battleship or a cruiser, but it was a big ship. And, well, we're listening. America's listening. We intercept that message. We hear about it. And that's one thing that no one acted on. No one acted on. No one actually decided to, well, let's check in with all our ships and see if one of them's missing. Nobody did that. Well, as the ship was going down, and went down in 12 minutes, SOSs were attempted. Standard frequencies in use on the ship were 40 to 35 kilocycles for those radio men out here, that's the ship-to-shore frequency, and then 500 kilocycles is the international distress frequency monitored by almost everyone. Well, on the Indianapolis, I had pointed out radio 1 and radio 2. Radio 1 had all the receivers, but not having a transmitter, the radio 1 has a line to radio 2 which has all the transmitters, and that's what actually sends out the message. So from radio 1, you can actually key transmitters in radio 2. Radio 1 was destroyed in the torpedo attack. But still, it was possible for a radio man to sit down at a key and key transmitters in radio 2. Radio 2 was intact, and it was cranking out an SOS on 500 kilocycles, and the transmitter needles were jumping every time he keyed, which was indicated energy was actually going into the antennas and going out into the ether. The radio operator went down with the ship. Well, yes, this is what happened. Now, these explosions are in the wrong place. The amidships explosion was actually under the bridge, and this explosion was ahead of turret 1 and blew 40 feet off the bow. And that was the big problem. Well, that plus the fact that the amidships explosion severed the communications from the bridge to the rest of the ship. It couldn't contact the radio, the engine rooms. And so here, they couldn't shut the engines off, and she's got a big gaping hole in front where the 40 feet bow used to be. Water rushing in under speed. The sailors reported hearing the compartments, the bulkheads, collapsing one after the other as the water rushed in. It led to her going down in 12 minutes. Along with no communication to the rest of the ship, the Captain McVeigh couldn't order anyone except the men standing around him within earshot to abandon ship. Well, in 12 minutes, listing more and more, most of the men were crowded on the fantail. They took it on themselves to abandon ship. But she was still moving. So men jumped off the ship in various places, which led them to being somewhat spread out. And then once they were in the water, ocean currents made them even more spread out. More about that later. And there they went. 900 men went into the water. 300 had gone down with the ship. They'd been killed, injured, or trapped when they closed the compartments. And the other 900 men went into the water. Many of them died the first day, or the first hours. They were missing limbs. They were burned over. They were charred from being burned. And exhaustion and hypernatremia. They got so thirsty, some of them started drinking seawater, thinking they could flake their thirst. But that doesn't work. That will drive you crazy. You get hypernatremia, which leads to delirium and even suicide. A lot of the men, after 4 days, most of the men were delirious. Some of them just out of despair would take off their life jackets. Yes?
That painting shows only one with a life.
Yes, some of them didn't have life jackets.
A lot of them
Didn't have clothes.
Yeah.
They were naked.
Clothes.
They did.
Yeah. So they didn't have life preservers either.
That's right. They'd been sleeping on deck. You imagine a steel ship near the equator in July.
Oh boy.
Pretty hot. So many of the men would go up on deck, sack out on the deck, either in skivvies or nothing. Captain McVeigh slept naked. So a lot of them went into the water this way, and they wound up in groups. Some groups, there were some life rafts, and the nearby men would gravitate around those and become a group. Hundreds and hundreds of men were all by themselves, floating around, either in their skivvies, or naked, or no life jacket. They'd been blown out of a sleep. And the ones who we're still alive, we're suffering from saltwater skin ulcers. Salt water is caustic to human skin. Any scratch becomes an ulcer, let alone a wound. And sunburn, they would fashion it. Those with shirts would tear off and fashion a little hat. But in the daytime they prayed for night, and at nighttime it was so cold they prayed for daytime. And of course thirst, they couldn't drink. And well, to get rid of waste, the body has to urinate. And to do that, it needs water, and it takes water from the water you've drunk that's dissolved in your blood. But when there's none of that, it starts robbing the water from your individual cells. And that leads to a medical condition of dehydration. And they couldn't sleep. If you sleep, your head goes in the water and you inhale salt water and you drown. So they couldn't get the kind of sleep, REM sleep, that refreshes the mind. So the deprivation of REM sleep added to the delirium.
Amazing anybody survived.
Yes. Well, the sharks showed up. After about a half an hour, oceanic white tips, thousands of them. They would tend to go after the men floating by themselves. Slightly safer were the ones clustered around life rafts, or there's another thing that was on board, it's called a floater net. I don't know how it works, but there were floater nets and there were life rafts and there were men around them. But most of the men were all by themselves, scattered, becoming more scattered because of the ocean currents.
Do they have why did the 300 survive? Basically, you talked that they were in groups, but do you know why the 300 didn't survive? Why didn't they all die?
Perseverance.
Perseverance.
Luck.
What was the Marine captain's name that helped organize
McCoy.
when you went under because of the
He was dragged under, thought he was going to drown and popped up to the surface. Yeah, he was the Marine who was guarding the sailors in the brig. He freed them. He opened up the cages or the doors and let them out. But some of them were not able to get up through the compartments before they shut the hatches. So they died in place. Well, on the afternoon of the fourth day in the water, what flies over but a Lockheed PV-1 Ventura? It's a sub-hunter killer. It's got depth charges and guns, and it's on a routine patrol, and it's looking for submarines to attack. Well, the plane was trailing this long wire. It was using as an antenna to radio home. By the way, home was in Palau. If you know where Palau is, it's down here more, yeah. That's a big base recently liberated from the Japanese, and so sub-hunters fly out from there. Well, she was trailing this long antenna, and to keep it stretched out straight, there was a weight on the end of it. Well, in flight, the weight kept coming off, so the pilot, Wilbur Gwynn, left the cockpit, crawled down into the belly of the plane, and looked out a window, and prepared to pull the wire in to put another weight on it, when he saw an oil slick. This is how it happened. He saw an oil slick and thought at first it was a Japanese submarine, so he went back to the cockpit, prepared the plane for attack, flew around, came down lower, and he saw men in the oil slick. Lots of men, hundreds of men, and that's more than a submarine. Yeah. In fact, that's a sunken ship, and it might be American. So he radios home to Palau. Another Ventura takes off to come and relieve him, because by now Quinn he's assessed the whole situation, but he's low on fuel. He's got to go back to Palau and refuel. So his replacement comes along. Actually, Gwynn flies back to Palau, gets refilled, and comes back. And is one of the ones who guides and directs and shows the situation to another plane that came along, a PBY Catalina. Now this is a seaplane. Note, it's got a hull. And, what?
Amphibious.
Yes. Some of the models have another machine gun window in the front, but this image doesn't. He's under orders not to land in the ocean. A seaplane like that is better for harbors and lakes. The orders are don't land in the ocean, you might not be able to take off again. But he sees the situation. Wilbur Gwynn showed him that. So the captain, or the pilot, Adrian Marks, lands her in the water with a couple of violent bounces. She comes to a stop in the water. Rivets popped. Seams open up in the fuselage. The crew stuffed pencils into the into the rivet holes and fabric into the split seams in the fuselage. So she didn't sink. And she taxied around and started picking men up. Even as he taxied, he was watching men being eaten by sharks. It was still happening. One man died of exhaustion swimming toward her. Well, they started picking men up and they piled them into the fuselage, and then when that was full, they started piling them on the wings, tied down with parachute cords. In so doing, they rescued 56 men, got them out of the water away from the sharks. Now, they concentrated on the ones floating around by themselves. So he bypassed a lot of groups of men around floater nets or life rafts. He was playing God, and it haunted him for the rest of his life.
So did he take off with the people?
No, he knew he couldn't take off, even if those guys weren't on it. The sea is just too rough. Well, the word got out. He was also from Palau. The word continued getting out. And 7 ships showed up and started the rescue. From Palau, the Doyle, these 4 from Leyte. By the way, these numbers are the numbers of men that they saved. It adds up to 316, actually. The books disagree on the actual number, 316 or 317. You might be interested in the calendar of all this. What we've got here is the end of July and the first 2 weeks of August. Gray is World War II. Notice where it ends. On the night of Monday, or actually the night of Sunday the 29th, and into the wee hours of the 30th is when the Indianapolis was torpedoed. Here's her ETA in Leyte. Here's where the PB-1 spots them. And the rescue begins that evening and goes through the next day. Notice that only a few days later, the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. And on the 9th, the atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki. When word got out, you'd imagine as the U.S. forces captured the Pacific, island after island, they would set up commands, they would populate them with military people, and along with them would come war correspondents. War correspondents work the war zones. And so the war correspondents on Palau, Leyte, and the Philippines, well, Leyte is in the Philippines, and Guam, got wind of this story. They found the hospitals and they interviewed the survivors, the ones who could speak, and they really got the gruesome details of the time in the water anyway. None of the survivors knew why they were sunk, why they were, they didn't know the details of all that, but they did know that they had to jump off a sinking ship, and they sustained 4 days and 5 nights in the water. Well, the war correspondents wrote their stories, and they were ordered by the Navy to send their stories to Washington, where the Navy would deal with them. So they did. Now, personally, I wonder if many of them, some of them or many of them, actually also sent their stories to their home newspapers. Nothing about that in any of these books. And boy, did I research. But, so, the Navy said that we'll put out a press release based on your reports. Well, the Navy didn't wait for them to come. They cranked out their own report and published it on the same day that the newspapers were announcing the war was over and Japan had surrendered and the war was over. Many feel they planned it that way. And in fact, here is the front page of the New York Times, August 15th. There's the top of the page. There's the bottom of the page. Cruiser sunk, 1,196 casualties. Took atom bomb cargo to Guam. The Navy wrote that. So I'm thinking that the Navy just they were continuing to deny the very existence of the island of Tinian, which was still involved in the Manhattan Project. Well, of course, there's going to be an inquiry. The Navy finds out about it and originally orders a court of inquiry on August 9th. Well, on August 9th, the atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, and Russia declared war on Japan. So the inquiry was postponed to start on the August 13th. Now that's 2 days away from the end of the war. Imagine hundreds of commands in the Pacific stepping and fetching to reorganize themselves in anticipation of peacetime. How will you change your operations? So talk about distracted men. Well, some of the distracted men wound up on this court of inquiry. But they attempted to discover the story. They debated the visibility at the time, the zigzagging, failure to zigzag, or the efficacy of zigzagging, the failure to report overdue, which those port directors didn't report, and the misinterpretation of that 10 CL 45 that said report shall not be made of combatant ships. And the court of inquiry wound up recommending McVeigh be court-martialed for, well, as they say, culpable inefficiency in the performance of his duty and negligently endangering the lives of others. He was as innocent as everyone else. He was blown out of bed naked. Well, also reprimands to Gibson and the communication staff. He's the one who didn't get his message. You know what CYA means? Yes. Well, in its efforts to throw a blanket over its donkey, the Navy put out a directive. Finally, I mean, this is after the war. All naval vessels proceeding independently will be considered overdue when they fail to arrive at a destination within 8 hours of originally expected ETA. The port director at the destination will report immediately all overdue vessels to his commander, who will arrange for necessary air and surface searches. Woefully after the fact. And also woefully incomplete. There's nothing in that statement saying how you would deal, nothing in this statement about constant contact with the ship traveling by itself, which would be the only thing that would save the men. Imagine the ship's ETA, the Indianapolis ETA, the very moment it's due in Leyte, or overdue, if you will. 900 men have been in the water already 35 hours. Add to that the time it would take to, first of all, realize the ship was missing, which would be hours, to realize, to investigate the non-arrival, which would be more time, then to realize a search was necessary, then to organize a search, then to conduct a search, and then to find the men in the middle of the ocean. It would have been days. So, lest too much importance be placed on anyone's failure to notice the ship missing, because it would have been days. Well, Admiral King, up there at the top, realized how hasty, how rushed this court of inquiry was and incomplete. He ordered his own investigation to start on October 31st. It was called the Supplemental Investigation, and it was conducted by the Naval Inspector General. This document that it winds up creating becomes very important. It interviewed 48 witnesses, including survivors, and it really probed everything. King wanted to know the last detail on why this happened. So they probed the routing choices for the Indianapolis, the availability of escorts, the non-receipt of the message to McCormick, the knowledge of the 4 submarines in the Philippine Sea that they didn't tell McVeigh about, and the knowledge of the I-58 message to home that had sunk a ship, and no one acted on it. Well, the investigation showed that the culpability for failing to act on all those knowledges extended to all the brass, all the way up to King. And the report of this was classified secret and kept from the public for 30 years. Instead, King called for the trial of Captain McVeigh to begin immediately. Why a trial? The supplemental investigation wasn't done yet. The top brass involved, who were set to publicly testify on the true causes of the disaster, were not yet scheduled to testify. So Admiral King called for the trial of Captain McVeigh to begin immediately. For 2 reasons: to divert public attention from the many failures of the Navy. If the public attention could be focused on McVeigh, the above testimony may never see the light of day. And to placate the public. 880 grieving families and much of the American public was hounding the Navy by this time, hounding the Navy for an explanation. King really needed there to be a trial.
Were there siblings on that ship? Brothers?
Not that I know of. Well, but McVeigh had admitted he wasn't zigzagging. There would be no need for a trial. He's already pled guilty, in effect.
Well, it was nighttime and foggy, and he said you don't have to
Right.
zigzag during nighttime.
That's right, and it was under his discretion, but apparently the clouds broke enough so according to the court-martial, the visibility was good enough for a submarine to sink him and see him and sink him. So in that case, he should have been zigzagging, yes.
He was only traveling 15 knots.
Yeah,
That's another factor. To me, that's another factor in driving that slow when it's capable.
yes, he was capable of faster, but they timed it. He wanted to arrive in Leyte on Tuesday the 31st.
It was,
at 8 in the morning in time to do some offshore artillery practice. That all worked out to 15.7 knots. Well, yeah, there would have been no need for a trial. He'd already said he wasn't zigzagging. John?
The other reason I think that supplemental investigation was not released to the public was because it involved intelligence from Ultra.
Yes, the knowledge of the 4 submarines in the area.
They're very paranoid at that time.
Yes.
And for years, 30 years, 50 years, they were paranoid
Yes.
about releasing a lot of that information of how we broke the codes and radio traffic, primarily how we
Right.
tracked Japanese ships.
Right.
Radio traffic.
And you can't use that information too much. Otherwise, they find out you've broken their code and they make a new one.
Exactly right.
Yep.
Why not, but
So to actually have a trial, they needed to bring in another charge, something that could be argued in a court-martial. So it caused there to be a court-martial. And the charge was failure to issue a timely order to abandon ship. Now, they knew that charge would probably not get a conviction. Who knows what's timely in 12 minutes of chaos on a sinking ship with explosions and no communication to the rest of the ship?
Duh.
right? Anyway, there was a trial. It was prosecuted by Captain Thomas Ryan, and the defense lawyer was John Cady. Captain Cady had no courtroom experience. He also, he was only given 3 days to prepare his case. And he wanted more, so inexplicably, he only asked for 1 extra day. So the court-martial began on the 4th instead of the 3rd. And these are the charges: through negligence suffering a vessel of the Navy to be hazarded by failing to cause a zigzag pattern to be steered during good visibility. And charge 2 is culpable of inefficiency in the performance of duty by failing to issue timely orders to abandon ship. I'm getting thirsty. Well, any testimony on the loss of the ship and 880 lives, the unescorted sailing, the submarine threat, or the failure to report the ship missing elicited objections, which were sustained because the trial was only about the above charges. So they refused testimony on anything else other than what they had on Captain McVeigh solely.
I heard that the Japanese captain of the submarine said, even though he was zigzagging, they still
Yes.
got him anyway.
Well, first of all, the survivors were present, American reporters were present, and everyone was horrified that there was a trial at all. Then doubly horrified when in walks Machasura Hashimoto. The Navy went and found him in Japan, flew him to Washington, brought him into the court-martial to testify against McVeigh, to say something against McVeigh. And he said, well, I have to back up. To bolster the case, the prosecution was trying to, the main thrust of the prosecution was to elicit testimony that zigzagging was at least partially effective. Effective enough that a skipper could be disciplined for not doing it. That was the foundation, that was the strength of their case. Witness after witness came up and said, no, zigzagging is useless, including American subcommanders. But the prosecution kept one of the witnesses on the stand long enough where he finally was, one of them said, well, yeah, okay, if I had a ship in my sights and it started to zigzag, I would have to recalculate my firing solution. The Navy had their case. McVeigh accepted everything. He was a true and obedient Navy man. All he wanted to know was why the Navy had taken so long to find his men. So he was convicted, acquitted of charge 2, but convicted of charge 1, hazarding his ship by failing to zigzag. His sentence was a loss of 100 numbers in his temporary grade of captain and 100 numbers in his permanent grade of commander. He'd probably never make admiral or command a ship again.
What
I mean,
does 100 numbers mean? I mean,
that's the way they rate your position among all the others who are vying for this position, right?
Seniority.
Yeah,
When you come up for promotion, they go down a certain number of numbers to be
Yeah.
considered.
right.
Could easily be post-war 25 at a time for
Yes.
captain to rear admiral.
And to get to admiral, you have to have commanded a ship, right? Is that right?
Maybe not necessarily.
Okay. Well, in consideration of his good record, the court recommended clemency. They didn't erase his court-martial, but they remitted his sentence, so he didn't actually lose those numbers. He was released from arrest and returned to duty, but his career was ruined. And he did retire in 1949, and they gave him what's known as a tombstone promotion. He was promoted to rear admiral, but it's the equivalent of a gold watch and a kick out the door. Four other officers received letters of reprimand. These are for not reporting the ship. But the letters are subsequently withdrawn, leaving the McVeigh the only culprit to 880 grieving families and much of the American public. All they knew is what the Navy wanted them to know. That supplemental investigation never saw the light of day. Well, on 23 February 1946, the Navy released its final word on the disaster, and it was based on that supplemental investigation. But the paragraphs describing the Navy's knowledge of the submarine threat were deleted in the final version. Well, and McVeigh started getting hate mail. The grieving families who didn't know the truth of it would send him Christmas cards saying it had been a great Christmas if you hadn't killed our son. He got stacks of this for the rest of his life, for 23 years. He had stacks of it tied up with strings in his sock drawer at home. And also, he lost his wife to cancer, and he lost his favorite grandson to a brain tumor. And out of grief and loneliness, in November 1968, he put on his uniform, stepped out his front porch, pulled out his service revolver, and shot himself. 1968. John?
Another, not to defend it, but it included, that one in the red, included a paragraph describing the Navy's knowledge of submarine threat was deleted.
Yes.
The reason it was deleted was because how they got that information, which was through Ultra. They were paranoid about it. Ultra.
Still paranoid about that?
Oh, for
Okay.
30 years. They were
All right.
paranoid about that.
Very good.
Excuse me, did McVeigh know that it was maybe not, that it wasn't effective zigzagging in those conditions, or not? I mean, he chose to.
That was debated in court, whether or not he was visible or.
I'm saying, did McVeigh believe that it was ineffective and that's why he didn't do that?
I don't know.
Why didn't he do that? Did he talk about why he didn't do
He
it?
knew the standard procedure, which was when night falls and it's dark, you can tell your operations officer to secure from zigzagging.
Secure from what?
Zigzagging. That's how you stop zigzagging. You tell your, yeah?
And the submarine also had 19 torpedoes. So if it missed with the first 18, there was still a,
Yes.
they would hit the zigzagging ship.
Objection. Sustained. You would have been objected to in the court martial.
Yeah.
They
Finally, the
fired
captain
6
of the
of them.
submarine got the
First
sinker ship.
salvo.
Say what?
Fired 6 with the first salvo.
Yes,
Yeah.
with the first salvo.
Jim, I was just thinking, going back and talking about Hashimoto's testimony that he gave.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that almost without precedent? I can't.
Yes,
think of any other
the
situation
public was
in
horrified. This
history
is
where the enemy was brought in.
That's right. That was a
and
first.
testified that his target was doing
Yeah.
the right thing,
Yeah, that was a first.
yeah.
I don't understand why they did not have 1 or 2 destroyers with him on that fatal voyage. And also, why did the cruisers not have any sonar? Think of all the hundreds of destroyers that were built. They could have put even a rudimentary sonar on that ship.
Yeah, but it would not have been able to attack it.
They don't have.
They don't have depth charges or hedgehogs
Still,
or
but he could have maneuvered if they knew he could have zipped
maybe,
back.
maybe.
I don't understand why some of those bigger ships didn't have sonar.
But your first question was,
Why there weren't escorts available.
they may not have actually been available. They were all up north around Okinawa and between there and Japan, becoming part of a fleet to attack Japan. They may not have been available. I think I came across one in one of these books that they weren't.
And he did request it, because it was not available.
Rich?
No.
Didn't
Go
have
ahead,
one?
Rich.
Okay.
I was just saying that finally the Japanese submarine captain got a chance to sink a ship after all those years and never given an opportunity.
Well, he was happy to have done it.
Yeah, I'm sure he was.
But he was sympathetic to,
He wound up recommending that the American, judicial system exonerate the captain, but that comes a little later. Well, here's the survivors. Many of them were at first reluctant to talk about their ordeal, even to their families. But in 1958, war correspondent Richard Newcomb found enough survivors to interview for the first book on the subject was Abandoned Ship that we've got in our library. It's exhaustively researched. It's the first book I read about the subject. Thank you. Well, survivors read it, and they started to open up to each other. In so doing, they started having reunions. In 1960 was their first reunion, and McVeigh was invited, and he attended. And he was afraid that he would be reviled for his role in their story. No, he was treated with love. When he stepped off the plane, all the survivors present on the tarmac snapped to attention and saluted him. But it didn't, he was a depressed man.
What year was that first reunion, Jim?
1960.
60?
1960. Well, they started having reunions every 5 years. But starting in 1995, they started becoming every 2 years. They realized, we're not spring chickens anymore. And they had been trying since 1945 to petition the U.S. government for the exoneration of their captain, which was now posthumous. But they got nowhere. They got polite denials from the Navy and a repeat of their findings that the court-martial was fair and proper. Well, at some point, in 1995, Paul Murphy became chairman of the survivors group. And Paul Murphy and his wife Mary Lou were instrumental in raising funds and organizing people to get this built. This is the memorial to the Indianapolis in Indianapolis, and it was dedicated in 1995. There's all the names. I'm pretty sure this is a story. I'd like to go there and read it. It's on the canal walk, a very lovely walk along the canal. Well, this brings us to Hunter Scott, an incredible player in this story. He's 11 years old. He lives in Pensacola, Florida, which is a major Navy town. He's watching Jaws with his family. It's his father's favorite movie. And there's this, you remember in Jaws, oh, by the way, this is the 50-year anniversary of Jaws, as well as the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. Well, there's this drunken scene on the captain's boat, and they're comparing shark bites. They're showing, this is where the one got me. And at some point, the captain launches into his famous soliloquy about being a survivor of the USS Indianapolis. Well, here's this 11-year-old schoolboy sitting there watching this. Well, he's about to enter 6th grade. He's about to enter middle school. His school's class project for the year is American history themed triumph and tragedy. So here's Hunter hearing about the Indianapolis. He decides to make that his subject. So he goes to the library to do research. You would think in Pensacola, Florida, there would be something about the greatest loss of life from a single ship at sea in Navy history. Nothing. Well, just a few lines, a few brief lines. Not enough to make a project. So Hunter is not to be deterred. He puts an ad in the local paper that he knows that Navy men read. Are there any Indianapolis survivors out there who would be willing to tell their story? Well, one of them did. One of them contacted him. Hunter Scott wound up interviewing Maurice Bell in his home, and he described his experiences of the 5 days in the water and the sharks and the fact that nobody knew about it. It was the first time he was able to open up to anybody about it. Well, not only that, Maurice Bell gave Hunter Scott the contact information for all the other survivors, 154 men. And so Hunter had hit the jackpot for his research. He went home and he mass-produced a questionnaire, and he mailed it out to every one of them. You know, please describe your experiences. Or did you have to deal with sharks? And by the way, do you believe the captain was wrongly convicted? And to a man, it's still there, okay. To a man, they answered, they were just horrified that there was a trial at all, more so that he was convicted of anything. 83 men answered him. There's a video of him sitting at a desk with piles of documents in front of him, just writing away madly. He's a brilliant kid. Well, he put together this. Have you been to science fairs where there's these 3 panels? He made one. That's a shark jaw, and that's him. His project won the competition in school and went on to become famous locally. His congressional representative, Joe Scarborough, offered to prop his display up in his office, and people would flock to see it, more people than would ever see Joe Scarborough. And then it got more famous, more widely famous. He wound up appearing on NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw, NPR's All Things Considered, one after the other, ABC World News Tonight, CBS, CNN, The Late Show. Not only that, he got noticed not just nationwide, but worldwide. They heard about his crusade, and it really was a crusade. Started as a middle school project, became a crusade for 4 years. They heard about it in Europe, and they heard about it in Japan. And Hunter was embraced by the survivors group, of course, and became an honorary survivor. And he started accompanying them to Washington for their many trips to try to get the captain exonerated. His passion, his eloquence, and his command of the facts really won the Congress eventually. Well, while he was doing the research, assembling all that stuff from those men, 2 men and the widow of a third called him, contacted him, said, I was there, I received the SOS message. In this case, the man's commander was Commodore of the Naval Base. Claire Young went to deliver the message. The answer was no reply at this time. If you get anything else, notify me immediately. But Hunter smelled, or not Hunter, but Claire smelled alcohol. Donald Allen witnessed a messenger deliver the SOS message to Commodore Norman Gillette. Gillette was in a card game and didn't want to be disturbed. But one of his duty officers saw the message, and he dispatched 2 seagoing tugs to investigate. When the card game was over, Gillette found this out and recalled the tugs. He was angry that he had not sent them himself.
He must have been losing.
might not have been a good card game. And finally, Russell Hetz literally called Hunter Scott when ABC News was interviewing him. I've got a video I'm going to show where Hunter Scott gets his phone call from Russell Hetz saying, I received 2 messages 8.5 minutes apart. My commander thought it was a Japanese hoax and failed to act. Now this is a video that I want to show later. I'm going to show it at the end. It's brilliant. You're going to love this kid. So please, I urge you to stick around after the Navy hymn, which is what ends the discussion. This is ABC News interviewing Hunter Scott, not just Hunter Scott, the victims in their 70s, talking about their time in the water. And also it winds up talking about Hunter Scott's efforts in Washington. So please stick around for this.
And now,
Oops. Next one, please. And here is Hunter Scott in Washington. And that's May 1999. The previous year, he attempted to drop a resolution in the hopper in Congress, but it never got a vote. So he and his supporting congressmen, and there were many, crafted a new resolution, House Joint Resolution 48 and Senate Joint Resolution 26. And that resolution stated, "It is the sense of Congress that the court-martial of Captain Charles Butler McVeigh III was not morally sustainable, that the conviction was a miscarriage of justice that led to unjust humiliation and damage to his military career, and that the American people should now recognize Captain McVeigh's lack of culpability for the tragic loss." And the resolutions also recommended awarding a presidential unit citation to the crew. The resolutions awaited a vote. Well, the next step in the Washington process is a hearing before the Senate Armed Services Committee. The committee was chaired by Senator John Warner, who was skeptical of the validity of the survivors' claims, and in fact was prepared to take the side of the Navy. The Navy was represented by Admiral Donald Pilling. By now, Hunter Scott and the survivors' contingent had the support of the influential New Hampshire Senator Bob Smith and many other powerful legislators. Hunter Scott testified. He introduced several previously unrevealed factors in the disaster, including the widespread knowledge of the submarine threat, which was now public. It became unclassified. And Hunter Scott was probably the first to find it. And the actual receipt of the SOS messages by the radio operators. Hunter had the best command of the facts of anyone in the room. And by now he's 13 years old. Well, he starts to win over Senator Warner.
He's calling in.
Well, the hearing reviewed the disaster and the court-martial. Pilling's stance, the Navy's stance, was that the court-martial was fair and proper because it was solely about McVeigh's failure to zigzag. Talk about doublespeak. And not about the loss of the ship or the men. They'd been contending that all along. But he could not satisfactorily answer this. If the ship had failed to zigzag, but arrived safely in Leyte Harbor, would he have been court-martialed? Well, of course not. And if not, then that trial really was about the loss of the ship and the men. Well, the hearing ended with a vote with many urging for a vote on the resolutions. But Warner still resisted until in November, he gets a letter from Atsushiro Hashimoto. I have met many of your brave men who survived the sinking of the Indianapolis. I would like to join them in urging that the national legislature clear their captain's name. Our peoples have forgiven each other for that terrible war and its consequences. Perhaps it is time for your peoples to forgive Captain McVeigh for the humiliation of his unjust conviction. Well, that won Senator Warner over. He called for a vote on those resolutions. And on October 12th, 2000, Congress voted on those resolutions, and President Clinton signed them, one of his last acts as President of the United States. Now, no one in the Navy had the authority to erase the record of his conviction or his court-martial. What they were able to do was put these words in his permanent record. It is the sense of Congress that one, in light of the remission of either, back up. Oh, that's it. In light of the remission by the Secretary of the Navy of the sentence of the court-martial and the restoration of Captain McVeigh to active duty by the Chief of Naval Operations, that the American people should now recognize Captain McVeigh's lack of culpability for the tragic loss of the USS Indianapolis and the lives of the men who died as a result of the sinking of the vessel, and two, in light of the fact that certain exculpatory information was not available to the court-martial board, and that Captain McVeigh's conviction resulted therefrom, that Captain McVeigh's military record should now reflect that he is exonerated for the loss of the USS Indianapolis and so many of her crew. So there you have it. He's exonerated. It was largely because the survivors group had that boy in tow, that someone listened.
Amazing they listen to an 11, 12, 13-year-old boy and not the actual survivors.
I've wondered that. And maybe it's just because it was such a unique situation. That if it could be...
Also the point that he was the expert.
Yes, he was the expert on the whole situation, on the whole incident. He'd been doing 4 years of research. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, let's return to Paul Murphy. He's the other bookend to our story. That's information about his life. He was born in Chillicothe, Missouri, on the Indianapolis. He was in fire control, calibrating the big guns, meaning the 8-inchers. Of course, he survived the sinking. He had a macabre quip that apparently sharks don't like Irishmen. He was rescued by the Bassett, USS Bassett. After the war, he attended the Missouri Schools of Mines and Metallurgy and got a mechanical engineering degree. In 1975, he moved to Broomfield. In 1987, he married Mary Lou Waltz. In 1995, he became the chairman of the USS Indianapolis Survivors Organization. In 2001, he was one of the 6 men who founded this museum. And in 2002, he published Only 317 Survived with his wife, Mary Lou. She was actually the editor. She collected 317 stories from the 317 survivors and put them all into this book. And he is buried, if you want to visit, the Broomfield Commons Cemetery in the military section. Well, I think it would be appropriate to end this with the first verse of the Navy hymn. How can I make it go? There it is. Now, how are you feeling? Do you need a rest? Oh, this thing will inspire you if your bladders will take it.
Yeah, let's do this real quickly though, Jim. Sorry to interrupt, but let's do if there's just a few more questions first, and then yes, I agree with Jim. If it's something, definitely I encourage you to stick around and watch it. How long is it about?
20 minutes.
About 20 minutes or so.
And you'll just love that kid. And
Right.
It brings the story to life.
Yes, and I'd like to, of course, present Jim with one of our challenge coins here for this wonderful job he did. I think you guys would agree. That was some great information. Thank you, Jim. Excellent work. Questions real quickly. I know you guys did a great job asking some during the presentation, but some other questions.
A technical question.
Yeah.
At that time, what kind of engines were they? They were steam?
They were steam, oil-fired steam boilers. Oil-fired devices that would create steam, and they would drive the turbines.
It was a turbine.
It was, yeah,
They were turbines.
they were steam turbines. Whoa, yes,
Just, there were so many issues and misunderstandings and stuff in the Navy about loss. But part of it also is the sea frontiers, or the two sea, you talked about chopping in and chopping out.
yes,
So, for instance, when a Navy ship or a command chops into a new area, there's all kinds of message traffic going nowadays.
uh-huh,
And when you chop out, same thing, so
yeah,
you chop out of a command area, and then you chop into a new command area. There's all kinds of stuff going back and forth to make sure they keep track of the ship.
right.
In World War II, I don't think that was the case.
I have not come across that in any of these books. All I know is that there was a dispatch that said when the Indy was gonna cross the chop line.
Right. Yeah, and without the message traffic, without all that, I think they improved it as time went on. But back
Yeah,
to things, command were being set up so quickly.
the Navy was expanding across the Pacific as they captured island after island, and they would
That was just one
set up
minor
commands and,
reason why, it was lost.
yeah,
They lost
there are reasons for that, yes. But, Bear,
Just a comment.
I'll get you
I think
next.
the reason that there wasn't greater uproar in the public or greater interest or awareness is because during World War II in the Pacific, there were 134 U.S. Navy ships either sunk or heavily damaged with a very high
Yeah,
loss of life.
I think over
So
300.
this, the USS Cole, when it was attacked in the Persian Gulf, 17 sailors were killed. Here we had tens of thousands of U.S. Navy sailors killed in the Pacific War
Yeah.
and ships sunk. So it's not as big a blip on the radar of public awareness that would have been if it had happened in peacetime or at some other time. Plus, there was a tremendous feeling of relief and concentration on what was this new special bomb that suddenly caused.
Yeah, there was that distraction.
It just overwhelmed all other news coverage at the time for months.
Yeah, yep. And, yes,
Did Paul Murphy ever do a talk on his experiences before he passed away?
he did.
Yeah, absolutely.
We, I tried to find it in,
It's up, we have it on our iPad.
yes, it's on the iPad, but I tried to find it in our YouTube archive, and it's not there. Mary Lou is there, but Paul Murphy is not.
We do have one up on the iPad,
Yeah.
in the Civic Room.
Yeah, that was based on the Omni Media Services interview.
He did an interview, I know he didn't do like we didn't have a coffee
No, he didn't do a
conversation,
coffee, yeah.
presentation, but he did an interview, which is great interview, yeah.
By the,
Can that get on the YouTube? Can it?
I think it is, yeah.
Oh, okay, I thought it was.
well, the interview with Paul Murphy is not.
Oh, it isn't, okay.
And the DVD, we have got a DVD of it, and it's damaged, so we can't do anything with it.
We could do that, we could put it on YouTube.
The DVD is damaged. Yeah. Yes, what?
Yeah, regarding the possibility of an escort, you said that I think you said that there weren't any destroyers near Guam at the time.
I assume that.
Oh, you were assuming this, okay. Because I was gonna say the invasion wasn't scheduled to take place, the first phase of it, until November 1st.
November,
So
right.
the idea that they couldn't have waited, given that the Indianapolis didn't have to be in the Philippines immediately around the beginning of August, they could have waited conceivably and requested a destroyer escort. But they were told by, as you said, by, I don't remember if it was an admiral or a captain, that, well, it isn't necessary.
Not necessary. That was the
So here
answer.
we're talking about one of the more valuable cruisers who had 10 battle stars leading up to this, but we don't care enough about it that we want to wait to get a destroyer escort to make sure that it can get safely to the Philippines.
There,
That's essentially what they said, right?
yeah,
That's what one commander said.
yeah. And one of the books, all I know is
One
that,
who was in a position to make the decision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Made a decision. And it was
All I've been able to find out about that is one of the books conjectures that a destroyer was not available, not in the area. So,
What was the perception of the Japanese submarine threat by late 45? Because my understanding is the Japanese, although they were pretty effective with their submarine force in the Pacific, they were never as effective as the Germans with the U-boats in the Atlantic. And by 45, it may have been popular feeling that the Japanese just did not have that many submarines left in the Pacific. So could have been part of it that played into it.
yeah, I don't know.
You had reports
Yes, you
that
did.
of multiple attacks and 4 in the area where
Yeah.
you're gonna be sending this
True.
ship.
True.
And they could have rerouted it without giving him the reason, without giving away that we've broken Ultra. They could have told him to be on the extra lookout for submarines and not given him the
Well,
reason.
then, under those circumstances, why not wait and provide a destroyer escort?
I don't know if one would have been available. He needed to get there.
Well, like I said, there would have been time, because the invasion wasn't gonna take place until November. You had months. Just sit the Indianapolis until you can provide one. Would have been an option.
Good hindsight.
Yeah, I agree.
Hey, Jim, just one quick thing. We do have an interview of Paul Murphy, and that's on the computer tablet in the Pacific War Room.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, you can. I don't remember the exact book I read this in, but I did see something that when Hashimoto came to the U.S., the U.S. government flew him to Washington. And
Yes.
treated him almost like a foreign dignitary. They put him in a very nice place to sleep.
The Navy did. The American public was horrified. Back then, you can imagine,
Really treated him like royalty almost.
I didn't come,
Los Dodgers were trying to recruit him to be a pitcher.
You're out of order.
Quick question. Okay, again, what was on board this ship that was the uranium you were talking about?
it was the uranium.
Okay, but how much and how is it gonna be used and all like that?
So the atomic bomb, the first one that was dropped on Hiroshima was a uranium bomb. The one that dropped on Nagasaki was plutonium. That's actually what was tested at the Trinity site. They knew the uranium bomb would work, and the way it worked actually was what they call a gun barrel. They actually fired uranium into uranium, and when they struck, it caused them to go critical. That's what the second component was.
Right.
They didn't want to have it inside the bomb until they were ready to fly it. In fact, they ultimately didn't even arm the bomb until they had taken flight from Tinian, Enola Gay. But that's what that second was.
And they didn't have an escort on something that critical. It just doesn't.
Well, it wasn't that voyage.
Didn't have it anymore.
Well, they didn't.
They already.
Actually,
It's still confusing.
actually, Dave, I think it did go from Pearl Harbor to Tinian also without an escort.
It did. Actually, I'm glad you just brought that up.
Yes.
It did, huh?
Yep.
Interesting.
Okay, we got time for one quick question. I know Gordon had his hand up over here. So Gordon.
Oh, Gordon.
In retrospect, have they looked to see if there were any other ships along that route?
They eventually found one. Recently, in 2017, Paul Allen of Microsoft fame found the wreck based on information from someone who,
But I'm just saying, at the time of the sinking, were there other ships that are on that same course?
no,
It was out
there were
by
not.
itself.
It was by itself.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick, let's say about 5-minute break here. If anybody needs to use the bathroom, get coffee, grab another donut, and then Jim's going to share this video with us.
Please
So,
come back and see this video.
yeah, it sounds really good. Thank you very much.
You just said that there was no escort from Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, probably, or from San Francisco to Pearl Harbor.
Here you're talking, yes, here you're talking about this incredibly valuable cargo, the atomic bomb, and no escort. Wow.
Look at the research went into getting to that point. The research that went into getting to that point.
Yeah.
To have something, not all,
Yeah.
you would think you'd have 10 ships.
Oh, yeah, no kidding. That is shocking, actually.
But this one's by boat, and the other one's by air. Why not take this?
Interesting, I don't know the answer. Well, that's it, actually.